Yeah, good. All right. So I'm going to read you something that comes from being stuck in a place where I thought I had no tools to do what I needed to do. Hence, Cinemontage, a cinema of exigencies, how lack produces excess and probably research. So, I'd flown westwards after visiting the Great Barrier Reef off the northernmost tip of Queensland. I arrived in Alice Springs in the red centre of Australia and stayed for a short while, being wary of the Aboriginals, as we'd been warned in Sydney that around 120 people die every year on the trip I was about to commence. And the implication was that the oppressors in Sydney kept alive prejudices about the peaceful Aboriginals as road trip murderers. In fact, the reason that tourists were dying was because as night draws in very, very fast in the deep bush in winter, if you were still driving towards Kings Canyon or further Ayers Rock, called Uluru, you might just hit one of the 13-foot high camels at 100 kilometres an hour, and there are some 30 million dromedaries roaming central Australia. They're basically drawn to the road's edge where all the moisture gathers and grass grows. It's the tarmac that produces moisture, which draws the camels. So when I go somewhere that speaks to me, I sometimes fret that I haven't a suitable tool to develop some resonant response to the spirit of the place I find myself in. A year earlier, I'd been in LA and needed to shoot a plate for a piece I was doing, and I couldn't afford a 4K camera, it being twice the price in LA. And I thought, what if I shoot several images with a Sony Z1, which is called HD, but it's nowhere near it. But if I keep the images smaller than 1/8 of the size of the image, then surely the reduced images will have sufficient resolution to be within a 4K image. The result is the bottom of this composite I've made as the central image of a triptych. It's a restaging of Dali's Crucifixion. That's my daughter hanging there. She got a first in fashion last year here, and this is my reward to her. So the resolution holds up regardless of the GUP structure of those images now transposed into 2K. So what you're actually seeing in here, there's bits of Bristol and there's bits of Los Angeles. When it's in a moving image in the triptych, it's called the intersection of dreams after Dali, because we were above an intersection and all of these cars move around the space. But it takes a hell of a lot of data processing to run all of these images together. Okay. In Kings Canyon, it was hot. I walked up the steep path and finally got to the ridge, and the crickets were chirruping in the heat, and the atmosphere was what one would imagine the feeling of the Garden of Eden would be like. Adam and Eve would be flat out on their backs under the shade of a tree in the midday heat. It's a place where hummingbirds would hover in the heat. Were there any hummingbirds in Australia? But Oz is too barren for that. A lizard scurried by on a rock at my feet, and my attention was drawn to the ants on the rock, Dali again. Then a small distant motion pulled my attention 500 feet down into the canyon below, where two miniature people were walking into the canyon proper. As I walked around the ridge and found secret places, stalagmites in a valley of rocks, hawks reeling above a flat area trapped high up between rising rocks, with occasional views of distant rising land, the canyon had its own feel, and I needed a response, and I had no equipment. Except I had an iPhone. Take still images? No. Create a soundtrack? Yeah. But I like sound and image together. Echo and Narcissus are not as powerful apart as when together. So I figured I'd shoot several movies and composite them as I did in Los Angeles in a kind of cinemontage. So I shot with no overall intention at this stage. Of course I composed the images, but I decided to just gather the shots so that I could composite them together. I walked and I stopped every time a feeling of the spirit of the place called me in some way on an intuitive level. 4 hours later, having come across a rock pool, which I swam in en route, I came down to where I'd parked the car. And 10,000 miles and a month later, I realised I had 32 moving images to composite together. I started working this in the edit, which took 3 days to render, which was a killer, and it collapsed many times before it got to the end of the render. So it's time to reflect on what I'd done and was doing and what I was about to do. In fact, this presentation should tell me more about what it is that I've done and whether it is something to pursue through your response. So here's the image, and here's some 3D glasses as we go one stage further into 3D. So if you can switch that to 3D. Right, now what you've got to do now is take your 3D glasses, which we will give you. is you have to pull the little button from off to on, hold it over to the right for a second, and then it should slot in. Here it comes. Has anybody got their glasses going over yet?
Mine have gone, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Actually got it. Well,
So, is it working?
Yeah.
So, get close. How do we turn this lot off? So what I started, can you see it? I mean, there's sort of some impossible distances. And when everybody's glasses are registered, that message will go off. So it struck me, this photo montage, and what about Cinemontage? I wonder if you can think of the 30s paintings with composite cities that weren't at ridiculous angles. So I suddenly thought, well, hey, maybe there's something in landscape. You're all being quiet. Why don't you get closer? Go into the image. So in terms of an installation in a black box, well, everybody's going to thieve all the glasses for a start, but is there something to be had in this form?
It's like a painting, and we're like people at a gallery.
Terry, what was the thinking behind depth? Did you start off with random, or did you go?
It's totally random. What happened is, what you can't see with the one that I showed before, which is the crucifixion, is that it started, the distant places were close and the close places were distant. So all of the 3D depths were wrong, which I thought, hey, there's something here to be had. And anybody got any ideas?
The one with the crucifixion, it had, I guess, the composition would be interesting to see. What I'm struggling with is there's no natural composition in the way. I mean,
absolutely, yeah. I wanted to.
It's like a 3D version of Hockney's Polaroid.
That was a thing in mind because I really, Picasso, Hockney, and into where we can go.
I'm thinking of Cézanne's the paintings of the mountains.
The question, I mean, I better stop now because we've got to get on. But in terms of, so we're talking practice as research. Now I know that I've got a thing going, and I can make more landscapes, and I can do this, and I can go into black boxes, and I can get audiences, and I can start to do evaluation about what they feel or think, and it might drive it, and then you get a piece of critical reflection to talk about me going, what the hell is it that I'm doing?
Well, I've never seen anything like it before, so surely that's a promising.
I have never seen anything like this. I never want to see anything like this ever again. But, okay, moving swiftly on. Thank you. I don't know what that is, but it's
worth pursuing.
we need to stop occupying your space.